Hello and welcome, everyone. This is Wanda Sturm, the Chair for Human Development and Leadership Division of ASQ, and we want to thank you for being with us today for Strategy Realization, Key Success Factors to Fully Realize the Benefits of Strategic Initiatives. I'd like to spend just a couple of minutes telling you that what's happening today is you're getting 2 times the benefit. First of all, this webinar is going to provide you some very key facts and some resources that will be useful to you in the influence of change in your particular organizations that you work in. And I know that all of us today in today's environment, regardless of industry, are going through some changes, whether they're positive changes or not so positive changes. So I think it'll be very apropos for this time for us. Also, you're going to get an introduction to our upcoming educational program that's entitled Strategic Engagement Skills for Professionals Leading Change. And again, that ties back to the change that is going on in our organizations. And both of these are going to be led by Kimberly Williams, which we'll tell you more about her in a few minutes. But first, I'd like to pass this off to Marilyn Monda to talk a little bit about the logistics for today.
Hello, everyone. This is Marilyn Monda. I'm your ASQ HDNL program co-chair, along with Doug Samuels. So today, everyone is going to be muted during the main presentation of the session. That's mainly because we want to be sure that we're going to have nice, clean audio for you. If you have any questions, please go to your control panel and you'll see there's a bar called questions. If you type something in there, I'll keep an eye on it. If it's something urgent, I'll interrupt Kimberly and let her answer your question. Otherwise, we're going to save them till the end so that we can have a brisk question and answer period. If you want to access this recording, the session is going to be recorded and made available for later viewing. You can see at the bottom the blue bar has 3 places where you can go for documentation of this session. Of course, you can always go to our website, asqhdnl.org, to find any of these materials. Also notice on your control panel there's a bar called Handouts, and you can click on that and download the relevant handouts for the session right now, as a matter of fact. I think that's all of the logistics. Please do type questions as you think about them. We'll organize them and address them at the end of the session. Go ahead and turn the page, please.
Okay,
Wanda?
So this is Wanda again. Thank you, Marilyn. And I have the privilege to introduce our exciting speaker, Kimberly Williams, the president of the Center for Strategy Realization. You can see by the slide here all of the great experience and background that she has. I'm not going to read that for you, but what I am going to point out is that she's an enthusiastic, energetic speaker, and that she brings a wealth of knowledge and background and examples to us today. So Kimberly, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Wanda. Nice to meet all of you virtually. Looking forward to a lively session today. We do have a lot of information to share, so if you haven't already, as Marilyn mentioned, please access, there are 3 handouts. The one that we're going to need as a part of our conversation today is the one that's entitled Research Report. So if you're in a place you can print that out, go ahead and do that. And if you can't print the whole thing for any reason, at least be able to look at page 7 on your screen, and I'll prompt you when we're going to look at that together. So here are our learning objectives today. The first thing is to share with you a fact base that I put together recently. The white paper and this presentation were shared initially at the Chief Strategy Officer Summit in New York City in December, and got a really positive reception. And I thought, I need to start sharing this more broadly. I never had facts like this when I was working in corporations. I was always, for every presentation I did, I'd have to go out and, bits and pieces together, and I thought this would be something really worthwhile to share with other people who are leading change, who need to have some data to share with their executives about why paying attention to the leadership aspects of change is so important. So I'm going to share that with you today. You are going to see a large quantity of statistics and quotables and things like that. Every bit of it is in the research report. You don't need to write these down. I would rather that you focus sort of on the story and the flow of what I'm going to share, and then you can go back to that research report and access the details later. We're going to do some quick assessment work around the strategic engagement skills. And we'll do as many polls as we have time for. There are 7 of them, so it really only gives us about 5 to 7 minutes a piece to work through these. I think we can get through those, but really want to make sure that you have the chance to evaluate where you are relative to these integrating these skills on your initiatives. And then, as Wanda said, along the way, as we talk through these skills, to give you a sense of what the program that ASQ is offering can do to help you integrate these into your initiative. Okay. So I just want to start out with a quick metaphor. These 2 guys are talking and they say, "Oh, really swift move buying that dehumidifier." And you can see that the water level has gone down, and probably the ecosystem in there is not so good, right, as the water level has gone down. And it occurs to me, this is a lot like what's happening with our initiatives in our organizations today, that in many cases we are not getting the results that we want, and we may be inadvertently doing some things or overlooking something that is contributing to this underperformance. In this case, these 2 guys are lucky because they've identified the cause, right? They know that they did a bad thing by buying the humidifier. But in our case, our initiatives are a lot more complicated than that, and there can be many factors. And so I'm going to share some of those with you today, along with some that I think we've got some more recent data around that really point to how leader behavior can influence the outcomes of our initiatives. So I want to roll through a couple of just context setting things in the front of this presentation very quickly. Again, all of this is in your fact base, but just to sort of lay the groundwork for talking about the engagement skills. The first thing is, you're going to hear me say realize many times during the course of our discussion today. And I just want to level set with everyone when I say realize exactly what we mean by that. So when we're talking about realization, we're talking about actually getting the expected value from a solution. And it may be over time. We may not get it all at once. So these are outcomes: revenue, better top line revenue, reduce costs, higher customer retention rates, okay? Contrast that to implementation, which is more activity-based, right? Putting something into place. Lots of times I think technology is a good example of this. We put all the components in place, we ask people to change their behavior, and we don't really get the ultimate benefits from that. And so the idea here is that this is happening every day on projects and initiatives inside our organizations, and there is real value being lost when we're not able to realize the expected results from our initiatives. And it's quantifiable, in fact. The problem is it's costing us a lot, but not many companies are actually measuring it. Those that are reporting, at least in the case of financial performance, that they're only getting about 50 to 63% of the financial performance that their strategies promise. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm not excited about walking in and talking to my boss about 50 to 63% realization. And there's another part of this study that indicates that we could get 60 to 100% more value out of our initiatives. I mean, imagine what that would produce in your organization if you were able to accomplish that, as well as your reputation as a change leader, right? So let's just start quickly here and get ourselves warmed up and take a really quick poll. And if you had to take a guess, give the group a sense of what percent of outcomes are you achieving on your initiatives today? I know this is a thumb in the wind kind of number, but I'm thinking of rolling everything together, like on time, on budget. Are you getting the financial value? Are you getting the intangible value? The things that help the company's reputation and things like that. So go ahead and give us a sense of, if you had to put your thumb in the wind, what percent of outcomes do you think your company is getting on your initiatives today? We'll have a couple of second delay. Looks like we have about 70% of the votes in. And I'm going to close it out now. We've got about 80% in. Yeah, so it looks like many people are in that 50 to 64% range that we talked about, and probably close to half, a little less than half, are even lower than that. And so this is a significant issue for organizations today. It's a significant issue for those of us who are leading change, obviously, right? So one of the challenges is that many organizations don't even bother to track benefits realization. About 60% said they don't have a process in place. If they do, it ends in an ad hoc manner. And only a fraction of those, look at this, only about 1 in 10 track benefits until they actually get the benefits and then they report on them. And only about 15% ever go back and compare results to what they forecast they were going to deliver. And examples of this value loss cut across pretty much every designation you can think of. It cuts across continents. It cuts across countries. It's measured in euros and Australian dollars and pounds. Although some of the data I'm going to share with you today is about IT projects, almost every project these days is an IT project, right? Maybe some of you remember the time where 10 years ago, we used to do a project and call it an IT project, whereas today, virtually every project we take on has some form of technology or automation associated with it. And so these are measured in the tens of billions. Even small fractions of failures have really significant value loss. So this is agnostic to geography, country, industry, company, department. Value realization loss is really everywhere. And one of the things that I wanted to experiment with was to think about, how big is this worldwide? If I looked at the major stock markets worldwide, the top 10 or so major stock markets, and I made some guesstimates. Let's say a publicly traded company, invests maybe just 3% of its overall revenue in its strategy. And let's say it realizes it has a 20% value loss, which is very low compared to what we talked about initially, very conservative. What would that actually mean in dollars and cents value lost across the world? And if you look at the major stock markets around the world, it's around 300 billion. That's really just with a swag, not too tough to quantify. And if you really took it a step further and you included non-listed companies, companies that aren't in the stock market, smaller markets, governments, quasi-government agencies worldwide, you very quickly get to a back of the napkin number of $1 trillion. And some people who have spent a lot of time and money measuring this put the estimates close to $3 trillion. And so there's a lot of arguments about where does that money actually go in terms of economics, and what would happen if we could capture it and filter it back into organizations and actually get the value that we intended. And so this is a very significant issue that should be on all of our minds. But the thing is, it's not just a financial problem. It's a human problem too. I mean, look at this. The Meltzer Commission in 2000 found that the flat-out failure rate of humanitarian projects at the World Bank was over 50%. So that means that people aren't getting basic life needs met. Again, a little tough to quantify, and I don't claim that all of the unemployment in the United States is accounted for by realization issues, but I think we've all been on projects where it didn't achieve what was to intended. The project closed down, perhaps people were laid off. The initiative that the result that was supposed to be introduced into the organization, the new department, the shared services center, whatever it was, never materialized, so jobs didn't materialize. And it affects our customers. 43% in this particular study said project failures directly impacted the customer, particularly in terms of the customer's reputation. And if any of you are working in the field of safety, for instance, this is where really the value loss is priceless. Lots of safety programs that were launched in the 80s and 90s, they're now finding that the cost of those and the long-term results are not what they expected. And when you're talking about long-term results in safe behavior-based safety programs, you're obviously talking about lives and disabilities and things like that. And so, it's not as if we don't know this is happening. Lots and lots of management methodologies have been introduced over the past 30 years. Everything from strategy management, TQM, OpEx, project management, change management. We like to have, when I do live speaking events, we tend to have good arguments over a beer after the presentation about where all the dots on this chart should be and how they evolved over time. But even if you don't agree with the details of the slide, I think most of us can agree many of these are in various stages of maturity in the companies that we work in. And so there's a lot of good news around this, which is the management methods are definitely providing value. Companies that are using scorecards are getting better operating performance, better profits. Most companies are now using them. Change management, data from ProSci indicates projects are potentially 6 times more likely to meet their objectives, can raise success rates as high as 96% when change management is used. And similarly with project and portfolio management, when they're used and they become mature, on almost every measure, the organization gets a better level of results. So that the data, the foundation is definitely there. But there's a disconnect then, right? Because where these are used and where they're being applied, they're definitely providing value. The problem is, according to PMI and the data that we saw earlier, we still have realization rates that are hovering in the 60s for the past 5 years. And so we set out to figure out, well, what could potentially account for this? We weren't necessarily looking for causal factors. We just wanted to understand what some of the influences could be. So we did a meta-analysis of 30 sources from people like Bain and Deloitte and sort of all the big names. And here's what we found out, that there are 7 major reasons for why projects are losing value, right? Why they're outright failing, which is a kind of a tough definition, but let's just say they're underperforming, right? They're not delivering the value that was expected. Lack of clearly defined outcomes, low senior management commitment, leaders not taking a common view or prioritizing, inadequate communication or information flow, middle managers lack the capability to lead the changes or are disengaged, adoption issues with the employee base, and performance linkages not being placed. So there were 2 others. I'll come back to these in a minute. But if you look across these, from a content analysis perspective, what you really see is that what's influencing initiative value, this sort of evaporating value that we were talking about earlier, there is a very strong element of leader engagement during strategy implementation that is influencing outcomes. Now, there were a couple of other things, insufficient funding or resources. Well, we need to dive into this further and understand what that means. That could mean that there are insufficient resources. The company doesn't have the money to fund these initiatives. Or it could mean that leaders are making decisions about how to allocate these resources that is not optimal to helping get initiative results. Similarly, methodologies, well, it may be that we have people who aren't capable in the organization trying to use things like project management and Sigma and change management, and so it's got a bad rap. Or it could mean that the leaders themselves don't understand it well enough to actually participate in the deployment. Okay, so from my perspective, on the surface, these don't seem like leadership issues, but if you get under the hood a little bit, they could be. And so, what we think is that it's possible that there's a niche skill set that companies aren't developing for. We all go through management training and we learn how to do operational reviews, staff meetings, budgeting, head count, all the sort of day-to-day management stuff. We learn future direction, when it gets from point A to point B at some time in the future. You lay out your mission, your purpose, your objectives. But for the most part, the leadership that we have learned through the years is really about getting people to point B, to a known end state. But the environment has evolved such that we, in some cases, don't even know what the future looks like. We're managing in an emerging future towards an end state that is unknown. And what I submit to you is that there's a special category of things, change leadership, that these 7 skills fit into this bucket. And that today, no one is developing for those. So if you look at what the CLOs, Chief Learning Officers, say where they're spending their money, they're spending it on basic management stuff, your typical strategic planning, innovation, talent stuff, which is a part of leadership. And the only one that I can see out of their top 5 that looks like it might even map to change leadership is communication. And what I'm going to show you is that there's much more work to be done around these 7 than just teaching leaders how to communicate. Unfortunately, right now, CLOs think that most of their programs are tied to the business strategy, but if you look at it this way, it kind of looks like they're not. So if we take these 7, these are the 7 strategic engagement skills that we think need to be in place in order to be able to better realize the results of initiatives. Inspire, align, network, translate, energize, manage, and guide. And in general, you are going to be that guide. All right. So we're going to walk through these. As I said, we have just a couple minutes each. And I'll give you a little bit more information about each one. So at this point, if you want to turn to page 7, and you'll see a graphic there that looks like this. We're going to walk our way around the graphic, and for each one, I'll tell you a little bit about what we cover in the program that could help you with that. So the first one is inspire, and here's some data on why we need to do more to inspire people to change. And when I say inspire, I don't mean warm fuzzy stuff. I mean I'm very much talking about articulating outcomes that are very specific, but doing it in the form of a story that moves people to action. And here's why. Executives are always really dismayed when they hear this, but what I think many don't realize is that the majority of their people are not nearly as business literate as they think they are. They can't read income statements. They don't understand the links between their work and the customer and the profitability of the company. And only about 4 in 10 employees, and this is pretty recent data, only about 4 in 10 say they know what their companies stand for. So you have people who aren't business literate who don't have a very deeply rooted purpose in the company. There hasn't been a lot of developments in behavioral science in the last couple of years, but there's been tons of development in the neurosciences that informs how we lead change. And this piece of data is relatively old, but it's a really good one. Your brain can process 11 million pieces of information per second in your unconscious, and only about 40 pieces in the conscious mind. And so where we need to go as we communicate with people is very much more lighting up their unconscious mind. There are techniques that are like neural coupling, where you learn to tell a story with such a cadence and such a flow that you are literally tapping into people's unconscious and implanting a feeling through a story that it's very hard for them to forget, and that will move them to action. So here's, I referenced earlier, there's some stories and tools that I have shared previously. You can find these on the ASQ HDNL website. There's a video of those stories previously. But I wanted to give you a sense today of, when we talk about inspire, how well are you doing on that today? And so go ahead and look at item number 1. It's the gray section, and answer this question on a 1 to 5 scale. My leadership talks about the future state initiative that I'm working on, primarily in terms of a visceral, compelling story, right? That brings the customer into it, that makes them emotionally want to move to action. It's still backed up by a business case. We're not getting rid of the business facts, but are your leaders doing that for you on your initiative today? And as soon as you've answered that, go ahead, please. And let's take a look at what people are saying across the group. So go ahead and record it on your chart so you've got something to take away, but also let's see what the poll looks like here. So we've got about 30% of the votes in. Is your leader talking about the future state in a visceral way that's getting people excited? And by the way, this is even if it's going to be a difficult change. There's lots of changes these days where the good old change management paradigm, WIFM, does not apply anymore because there is no what's in it for me. And so we need to find new ways to help people motivate themselves. Got about 70% of the vote in. And a lot of that has to do with how we tell that story. So let me share the results with you. So it looks like to some degree or not so much, right? And I'll tell you, a lot of people say to me, oh, my leader could never do that. And my response to that is, yeah, but if you knew how to do it, you could coach your leader to do it, right? You could set up that story and help your leader. And so part of what we do in the program, my apologies, let me find my way back to my slide here. Part of what we do in the program is to help you build skills around storytelling. Helping to take, this is a very data intensive crowd. So how do we transform all that great data into something that is visceral? What's the formula for a compelling story? And how do we surface our leaders' motivations through powerful questions so that we can get them engaged in the story that they're telling? Those are some of the kinds of things that we work on together. The next element is align. And I love Align because I love working with groups of leaders in the organization. This is where all the good, messy cat herding happens, right? Lots of people don't like this. But I'll tell you, once you learn some of the techniques around it, you see how powerful your role really is when you do it well. And other people take notice of that as well, right? Because they see you as someone who can very efficiently work with senior teams and help them. So in terms of alignment, helping leaders get to a consistent view and making decisions and prioritizing, it's interesting, you very rarely see a number like this in any type of a survey, I think, but this is the percent of employees and executives who believe lack of alignment impacts project outcomes. So pretty much universally, we all agree that when we're not in alignment, good things will not follow. But we always don't know, well, what do we need to do about that? And again, one of the key success factors for projects is leaders being able to do these kinds of things, and they're not necessarily being taught or developed how to do that in your organization today. And so you have a role in coaching them and being more effective in doing that. The big thing here, and I think we have all experienced the pain of this, it's about losing time, right? When leaders aren't making decisions and they're not prioritizing, a whole lot of time gets wasted. Now, this one is just about conflict. Right? If when people are disagreeing and we have to spend time dealing with that, this seems low to me. Roughly 3 hours a week working on conflict and disagreement. I don't know about you, but in my job, it's far higher than that. But I mean, just think about it, even if it was this low, how much time are we burning up on our initiative when leaders aren't making the decisions that they need to? It's a lot, and all of that adds up to value lost on the initiatives and the soft cost of wasted time. Ultimately, the value of a company is the sum of the decisions it makes. And I thought this was great data to be able to share with an executive. A Bain & Company article showed that shareholder returns generated by companies that are really good at decision making is fully 6 points higher than their peers, and that the average organization has a potential to more than double its decision effectiveness. And a lot of that has to do with coaching leaders how to do it. So alignment really has to do with the skill set of you being able to help them with decision making and prioritization. In the course, we use some case studies. This particular one is 12 Angry Men, but also some tools and some frameworks to really help you understand, well, what questions do I ask to get leaders aligned. By the way, there's only 5. It's a very small number, but if you ask the right questions and you don't ask too many of them, you are actually the person who can help simplify the conversation, remove the complexity, and figure out what the key issues are. So the skill building here is really around decision making. So let's go to the second item. This is the red one on your chart. Go ahead and rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5. Are decisions and priorities being agreed upon in a timely fashion on your initiatives? And by the way, pardon me, I know some of these questions are double-barreled. Do the best you can with them. This comes from a much more extensive realization survey that we do in the course on our projects. And I'm just trying to kind of boil some things together here so that you can get a good flavor for, what are the kinds of things that we do. So go ahead and answer that for yourself. Let's take a quick poll. And I know I'm moving quickly, but again, you'll have the recording and you've got all the data. So let's go to number 2. Are your leaders making decisions and prioritizing? And are they behaving in ways that are consistent with their goals? Are the politics managed, or are things really feeling sort of out of control from a decision prioritization politics perspective? Got about 50% of the votes in. Okay, around 70%. I'll close it out and share the results with you. Yeah, so to some degree, actually, this is a little better than usual. Usually, it pretty much stops around to some degree. So, but this is a problem, right? So, if only about half the time you're getting the decisions and prioritization and behaviors that you need from your leadership team, that's like walking through quicksand in trying to get things accomplished on your initiatives. And I know that you have all had a personal experience with that. So the skill building here for you, and the kinds of things that we cover in the program, are mapping the political landscape. Sometimes people have a hard time figuring out what the politics even are and where they should engage and not engage. Figure out which are intentional roadblocks and bad behavior that need to be dealt with. Learning to serve as a more neutral, respected resource. And, lots of the teams we deal with maybe aren't that effective, but that doesn't mean that we need to intervene in every dysfunction. There are some that are more important than others, and those are the kinds of things we work through. All right, so let's quickly move on. This is one I think that you're probably, of the 7, the skill set that I think you're probably most familiar with, really developing the plans and the internal network required to successfully implement an initiative. I found this shocking, although I guess in my professional experience, it shouldn't be shocking because I think we all see these things come and go, but half of the project management companies, project management offices and companies close within about 3 years. And it's exactly a time that we need a more rapid style of implementation. So there seems to be a disconnect against the style of management of a PMO and what the trend is in organization today, which is moving towards smaller, faster moving projects through Agile, and not just Agile, but other mechanisms as well. Working on smaller projects more quickly allows us to get the wins. It can be challenging in terms of holding the program together when you're implementing smaller things over a longer period. But for sure, this is the trend. And I've never seen a number like this for quality or operational excellence. But I'm wondering if it's tracking in a similar direction. That where we should be leading this, we're actually struggling to keep pace with the pace of business. The other one that I found really interesting, this study is less than 2 years old, leaders are going to need to rely on a more nimble network approach to local execution. So as projects get smaller, more agile, they become local, the managers are going to need to take on more of that. But only 70% of the organizations believe their leaders had the flexibility to effectively do that, to create those networks and energize people to actually change their behavior. So the skill set here for you, and that we work on together in the program, is around facilitation. And I don't mean the kind of facilitation that you stand up toward to a flip chart. I'm talking about facilitating things happening in the organization. So go ahead and answer for yourself now. Do you have an implementation network in place and ready to go, skilled up to support your managers and in what it's going to take to actually implement locally? So I'm looking at the time, and in the interest of time, I'm not going to do the poll, but I hope that you do continue to follow along with the ratings so that you have a takeaway from when you leave, that you can see the patterns where you're going to need to do some work after you leave in order to really be able to help your initiative be successful. The skill set that we talk about here is rapid project team functioning. Again, for many folks on this phone, I think that this will be the most intuitive part. But how do you actually develop a change network? Why do you do that? Who should be in it? And these aren't jobs. These are someone's responsibilities. So how do you actually get your leadership to buy into that? And how do you start surface and scaling solutions instead of just designing new ones all the time? And finally, making enablers in place. We have a nice model around enablers that you can figure out for each of your initiatives. What are the enablers that are going to need to be in place for you to be successful there? The next strategic engagement skill is around leaders being able to translate high-level corporate priorities down to a level that their people actually care about. And many leaders have not been taught how to do this. It's not just communication, right? It's really appealing to the kinds of things that motivate their groups. Everybody is experiencing change virtually. They've said they have a recent shift in their operation, and more than two-thirds of them say they're not getting enough information. I'm actually surprised this number isn't even higher than that, because I think no one ever feels like they're getting enough information during times of change and transformation. And yet, we need to fill that gap. And the people who are closest to our employees and can help us the most are oftentimes the people that we as change leaders are not effective in influencing, right? They're too far away from us sometimes. The unfortunate thing is that more and more companies are saying this ability of a manager to have candid dialogue with their people is the skill they think has the greatest impact on overall company performance. So our ability in coaching, indirectly coaching middle managers to be the bridge between those big priorities and people's personal interests is the skill that we need to learn. And I love this statistic. When employees understand their role, 91% work toward that end, but the numbers plummet to 23% if they don't. And so being able to work with managers on getting people engaged in making these changes is huge. So the skill set for you is coaching managers, even when you're maybe not all that close to them, right? You may be coaching managers from around the world. This is about leveraging your voice and your sponsor's voice so that managers can use that same language and help their people change as well. So do your quick assessment in your book. Are leaders at every level of your organization translating priorities to help get that anxiety level down and bridge the gap between those big company goals and something that people care about actually doing locally? The skill set that we work on here in the course, and I have a fabulous, a terrible and also fabulous experience to share with you around how I learned the difficult lesson of the importance of influencing people in an organization to move towards changing their behavior and the consequences of not doing that. So we talk about those kinds of things. Also, how to localize priorities, what interim solutions might be put in place to close the skill gap. We don't always have middle-level managers who know how to do this. I fully recognize that. And we often don't have the time to wait for the next management development program to come down the pike from a learning organization or anywhere else. We need to do very specific things just in time so that managers can say and do the right things to help influence their people up the curve. The next engagement skill is energize. And, I think this is really where the rubber hits the road, but you can't get here unless you've done the other things that we've talked about. This is where we want to get past fear and negativity. I think lots of times change leaders think, oh my gosh, I didn't think this change was that big of a deal. It's just, all I'm getting is this negative feedback, right? And managers feel that too. But here's the thing. The brain is wired to do that, right? We can go from an observable experience, or let's imagine that a manager is in a small town hall meeting with us talking about some changes that are coming. Before she can even get the words out of her mouth, it takes about 0.4 of a second. At the speed of thought, you can run up your ladder of influence saying, oh, I remember when this happened before and bad things happened. It's probably going to happen again. Therefore, here's what I think I need to do. I disagree with this change. Before she's even finished her opening paragraph, someone in that audience has run up their ladder of influence. Now, to the extent as a manager that people are doing this, as you can imagine, you can totally change the way you present ideas, right? You can totally change the way you interact. And the beauty of this costs no money, right? It's just a shift in how we do things. Negative thoughts are everywhere. 70% of our mental chatter is dominated by negative thoughts. That's the environment into which you are implementing your very important initiative. And so if you were thinking, geez, my company is really negative, the people that I work with are really negative, this just is my company. It's not just your company, right? This is the environment that we live in as change leaders. And we live in an abundance of negative chatter and a low amount of trust, right? Most people don't trust management in a general sense, right? The management of the company. Few feel safe communicating their ideas with senior leaders. But under it all, people know that they really need to trust their boss to be essential, so most are willing to take that chance. And about half feel comfortable communicating their ideas and trusting their peers. And so if you look at your project plan, I would ask you to leave here and have a look if you have a change management or a communication management plan in place and ask yourself, are you pushing against human behavior? Or with this in mind, are you putting things into your project communication or change plan that is taking advantage of the way people already behave, right? You can allow human behavior to pull you along, or you can push up against it. But these are the kinds of things that you need to know to be able to coach your leaders to be more effective in their implementation. So let's go to the green section of your evaluation. And I'm noting the time, so we have 2 more to do, and then we'll do a quick close. Are your managers and employees working together to get them over this hump of negativity and discomfort to be able to change their behavior and remain productive? How's that going for you? Typically, the results are between 2 and 3 here, so you can check yourself against that. The skill sets we work on in the course, again, we've got some funny stories and lots of real life examples. I think I've worked on about $4 billion worth of initiatives during my career, so I have lots of stories and examples to share with you. But in this particular section, I actually share scripts and other things that you can use done for you that you can take back to your HR group. You can customize them to really get through some of the top issues that people encounter when they're going through change. So helping managers coach their people, setting up these peer-to-peer conversations, what to help them say and not say, and also to facilitate support mechanisms. They can't do it on their own in many cases, and there are some easy, not too expensive things that you can do to help them with it. Manage is about, so now the rubber's hit the road, you've asked people to change, you've asked them to get some things in place, to take action. Now what we need to do is to sustain it, right? To get the results we talked about and to keep them going, to ultimately realize the value of the work we've been doing. Most organizations use performance management to do that. They say, you know what, I'm going to take these goals and I'm going to put them in your annual performance plan, and you got to do these things. Here's the problem with that. Only 6% of people in organizations believe their current process for managing performance is even worth the time. 6%. Dismal. 58% say their performance management process is weak, with North American companies being even worse than that. And that's very recent data, HBR data. So the performance management process is broken. And this is perhaps my favorite quote in this entire presentation. So DDI did a study, and they asked people to rank order where having a performance management discussion with their boss falls along a dimension of a bunch of other things that they could be doing. They said they would rather have a bad hangover or get a credit card bill in the mail than face the prospect of having a performance discussion. So not only is it not effective, but people don't want to do it. And so without going through all the details now in the interest of time, there's a new way. We really need to be raising the bar on performance in organizations, but there's a lot of there's a lot of concern about any discomfort that could potentially cause. And so, what needs to happen is that we have more frequent feedback, more accountability agreements in place, and that maybe we don't do away with the annual performance process, but that we find alternatives to help people get feedback more quickly and more concurrently with the work that they're doing. So here the skill set for you to work on is helping people to build agreements, outside the performance management system to really make sure you're getting results that last. And some of the kinds of things that we would work on here with you are, how do you really negotiate required outcomes? Most of the handoff agreements that I see are task lists. And so there may be a control plan associated with that, or an FMEA that says, hey, here's the things could go wrong. Here's the things that need to get done. Here's the watch outs. But many of the things that I see are activity lists. What I'm suggesting is that we need to shift to more of an outcome focus. Making results stick by leveraging the enablers that you put in place. Again, lots of times when I look at what's being handed off from the project team back to the business, it says things like put talent management plan in place, determine new compensation and reward strategy. Well, if they're, things like that are not enablers that are part of the handoff, it's possible they'll never get done and that they'll never enable the sustainment of the results on the project. And so really figuring out how to work together to make sure you've got the right enablers in place and that those aren't all just being deferred as a next project. And helping people and coaching them to have a different kind of conversation around accountability. Accountability makes people uncomfortable. That sort of gets back to this, right? Discomfort. And so your role as a change leadership coach is to help them have conversations despite the fact that it may make them a little bit uncomfortable. And let's go to the last one, guide. The last capability is really making sure that initiative leads, you all, are in a position that you and your role are positioned to coach senior leaders on their commitment, the kinds of behaviors and interactions they have, and artfully applying your methodology, whether it's a Sigma methodology, a change management methodology. Most executives I know are put off when people approach them, when change leaders approach them with the methodology, right? We want to approach them with the business problem, not the methodology. But in many cases, that's where we are in the organization. Only about half of PMO leads, which should be very strategic roles in organizations, only about half of them are actually involved in a strategic planning process. And many say that among their top challenges is not being seen as overhead. The business does not understand the value that they bring because in large part, they are not able to articulate their value, right? And so one of the things that we work on here is exactly how do you articulate your value? And for sure, using a fact base like this with things that have been demonstrated and proved by others and insights that have been uncovered, starting to provide that quantifiable base of value and becoming associated with that. A lot of people in organizations, though, who are leading change don't actually know how. That's among the top 6 challenges, according to IBM, in leading initiatives, that the people who are leading it and the folks that are supporting them are going through the motions and they don't actually know how to get the results that are needed. And I know that I don't need to tell you this because we've all experienced it many times over, but the vast majority of projects don't have an effective sponsor who actually knows what their role is and what they are supposed to do as a sponsor. We cannot fix the whole problem, but I personally believe that when we are effective guides, that we can impact all 3 of these things in a very significant way. And lots of companies are starting to come to that conclusion too. Many more have started using internal coaching programs that help to make sure that the quality of interactions, that their quality, their operational excellence, project managers, HR business partners, change managers, right, all those people who are helping to lead those changes, that the quality of the interactions with their leaders is better, right? They're trying to introduce programs to them that will help increase the behaviors that they are able to get from effective behaviors they're able to get from leaders. So 73% as of 2014 started offering internal coaching programs. Many are now also certifying because they want to make sure that whatever they're using meets an effective standard. And so the skill here for you is around, are you really getting the most out of how your role is positioned? Are you getting the access that you want? Are you having the conversations that you want? So in the last area, the tan area that's in the middle of the chart, you'll just write a number in on this one. Are you positioned as a coach or an advisor right now with your senior leaders so that I call it here your services, but whatever it is you're bringing, if you're bringing change management, project management, quality management, any other skill set, they need to know how to use you. Do you think that you're being used today in a way that they're getting the most value from you and in the way that you can receive maximum rewards for your effort? To me, this is a two-sided coin. I think that we have, we suffer from low value esteem sometimes, change leaders, because we think, we're pushing the rock up the hill, we're working silently behind the scenes. And I'm here to tell you, it doesn't have to be that way, right? When you're delivering huge value in an organization, it's much more likely that you can get better rewards for yourself. So go ahead and rate yourself on item 7. Are you positioned in the way that you think you should be to provide as much value as possible? And here are the kinds of things that we work on in the program. Guide is almost a double module in the program because it's in the center. It's so central to being able to coach leaders on all of those and know how to do yourself, all of those other things. So some of the things that we talk about are, I don't believe in contracting. I think if you put yourself in a leader's position, no one likes to be contracted with, right? They feel like at the time where we should be trying to build a relationship, it puts them in a position of feeling like we're trying to pin them down, right? So I believe in working agreements. I also believe in mutual feedback as probably the best lever to move yourself up from being a pair of hands to a strategic provider. Provided that you know how to use feedback effectively, of course, and we do talk about that. But, executives many times, even though they may act like they don't want feedback, lots of them only get filtered feedback or no feedback at all. And I'll tell you, when you start to be the source of objective feedback for a leader, that's when you really start being drawn into the inner circle, learning things you didn't know, really building that trusted relationship. Plus, we also talk about things like presence and gravitas and, how to really show up as a leader, even though you may be a more junior person working with more senior people, how to tell a story about yourself that immediately and quickly resonates with the people that you're working with. So you're pulled in sooner, essentially. You start to build a brand around what you're able to give. And so there they are, the 7. It sounds like, Marilyn, you may be opening up the line.
Yeah, I just clicked open to let you know there are 5 minutes left.
Okay. So I'm just going to spend about 30 seconds per slide, and we'll try to cover a couple questions. So we've been talking about the program here and there along the way. It's coming. This is really about increasing your professional net worth. It's easy to access. It's virtual live with me, 8 weeks. We're going to go through all these in detail, lots of application, go to training platforms. So we have the ability to do breakouts and assessments and all kinds of fun things. We're going to work, these are small groups, so we all have the ability to work on the things that are most challenging for you. And as a part of that, you get all sorts done for you, frameworks and guides and things like that. And so these are the skill sets that we work on together. Lots of benefits to getting these. I won't go through every one, but better sponsors, your role's better positioned, stronger middle management, and we've gotten great feedback on this course. So the handout is in your the brochure is in your handouts here. So please do download that. Have worked with fabulous clients from around the world. Really are getting raves on the approach. People have said to me, this is the thing that has been missing all along in my project career, and I feel like now I've got the pieces put together. And no matter what methodology you may be using, it integrates into those, because it's not a methodology itself. It doesn't force you into a series of stage gates. It integrates into whatever you're doing. So ASQ has been kind enough to work out special pricing. So I know a couple of emails have gone out. Go ahead back and look at that. There is also an even lower rate for early bird registration, which goes for another week or two. And you've got all the information. If you want to send a group of people, just get in touch with me. This is also included in your handouts. This is an overview of all of the strategic engagement skills that we talked about today. And keep in mind, you have a huge role in integrating these skills, building them yourself and integrating them into the project. And remember that the invoice for improving these capabilities is pretty modest given the outcomes it's likely you'll get on your project. So you can do it. You have the ability to raise the waterline, and on behalf of your leaders and the people who work in your organization and on your projects, and of course myself, thank you so much for hosting me today. It has been wonderful working with you. And if we have a moment or two for a couple of questions, be glad to answer those for folks.
So the first question we have here, Kimberly, is 9 weeks of webinars scheduled. How and when? What amount of time for each webinar, and how do they get the cost information?
Yep. So great, Kimberly. Thank you. So it's 8 weeks. It's 2 hours every Thursday with me, virtual live. All the sessions are recorded in our team room. So if you're traveling or you have to miss a session, it's always better to be there with the team. We've got a couple of major corporations signed up now. As a matter of fact, some of those are operational excellence folks as well. So I'm looking forward to a really good group. And Marilyn, what is the best way for them to get the pricing information? It's in the brochure, but that's not what the ASQ price is. I know Stephanie sent out a couple of emails. Could we maybe send a follow-up to this group? Would that be the best thing to do?
Yes, Stephanie, can you come on the line? She may have stepped out.
Yes.
There she is.
No, I'm here. So the best way is actually we posted the information on the ASQ HDNL website.
Oh, right.
So if you go to http://ASQHDANDL.org. You'll actually be able to find, there's a whole special page on the strategic engagement skills class, and it includes the cost information, it includes the 8 weeks and the date and times, etc. So I would encourage folks who might be interested, if you want some more information, you can also download the brochure directly from that website as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Oh, she said, can you share that link again? Is it possible to type it in the chat line, Stephanie?
I will do that.
Great. And while she's doing that, are there any other questions? I really hope that you guys go to the HDNL website that Stephanie is directing you to now. In addition to seeing the guide, you can also reference the primer that Kimberly wrote for HDNL on this concept, and that will give you a lot more information on the 7 skills that she went over during this webinar.
Good, thank you. Any other questions?
Kimberly, I think that's it for the questions today.
All right, so at this point, then let's hand it back to Wanda and we'll close her out.
Great, thank you so much. That was very informative, and you know, as a change practitioner, it's very helpful to go through this and to see the integration of these skills. So I know it's got to be informative for everyone else as well, and I hope that people will sign up for the session. Your feedback, every one of you that participated today, we would love for you to answer the short survey that you'll receive right after this. And please let us know if you have any other questions. There's a place to provide comments to us on the website as well. So we'll be happy to take any questions or be able to help you in any way that we can.
Excellent.
So Kimberly, thank you very much. I really appreciate you sharing your expertise and insights with us today.
Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone on the line, and look forward to seeing you in a future webinar. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks again.
Thank you, Kimberly.
Bye-bye.